So next up, we have Bob Shallow, who is the Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Rovi. He joined when they were acquired by Gemstar in 2008, and previously was Director of Multimedia Experiences at Nokia. Please welcome Bob Shallow to the stage. Bob Shallow, hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you doing? You want to stick a seat here?
Snuck up on you.
You did. I thought you were coming from the other side. So I think everybody's pretty familiar with Rovi, but there are a lot of parts to your business. And today you're going to talk primarily about multi-screen and personalized television experiences. And I understand you're going to start off with some consumer research that you can share.
So part of our business is obviously keeping tabs on the market and understanding what's happening, not just in the US, but worldwide, both in the service provider space and CE. So there's a few macro trends. If we hit the slides, we can run through it pretty quick.
Sounds good.
And I realize I control the slides, so I'll move them ahead. So, one of the big trends is content obviously is digital these days. When you think about distribution, it's moving all towards IP. And the trend in the device world is really about personalized devices, primarily being driven through wireless devices, so smartphones and tablets. And one of the interesting data points is how smartphone sales is increasing throughout the world, eclipsing feature phone sales, which are declining at a pretty significant rate. And so when you think about that and how that impacts the overall media experience, it's pretty evident that when you're in the living room with the family, the experience is changing. Everybody, while you have the big screen and you have the big experience, the lush colors and high quality video, people are also multitasking using those devices. So increasingly what you're seeing is an experience that's becoming much, much more personalized based on how people are using those devices and integrating those devices into the overall experience with the family. And so as things become more personalized, more individually focused, it becomes more about matching recommendations that are useful, and those recommendations are very personal, number one, but also they're aware of the environment and the setting. So a great example of this is there's a lot of horror movie fans, but they might not necessarily be such horror advocates early in the morning. So imagine,
I know I'm not,
yes.
So yeah.
So it's very important that when you think about a recommendation, it's got to be aware of the situation, the space. And you notice on this slide we're indicating, or where it's circled, we're talking about a recommendation that's been tailored for the mother in the home. Use a personal device to set up your service. We're used to that, right? That's what you do every time you get a new mobile phone now. You have to go through a setup process. And then when it's linked to your service, there's an awareness of that profile, and therefore the recommendation is more personalized. So then when we think about what is the most important screen and as part of the experience, size doesn't really matter that much anymore. So sure, you like to see the big screen and the rich images, but the fact is the most important screen is the screen that you're spending most of your time looking at, right? And in many cases, some of our research indicates that in a family setting, as people are watching TV, about 27 times an hour, their attention will get diverted from one screen to another. So that's a pretty significant change in the dynamic of the whole TV experience.
Okay, so actually, let me stop you briefly before we move on to the demo. So, as you're talking about a lot of these personalized experiences, those rely on the data that underlies all of that. And that's always been a touchy subject, particularly in the cable industry where there are regulations that govern what the operators can collect and how they're using that data. Has the mindset changed at all? Where are we in that space?
Yeah, so personalized data is an interesting situation, obviously this week, especially given some of the issues with the leaks and that sort of thing. But we have been collecting clickstream information with our guides for years. And of course it all complies with privacy provisions, and those provisions are different in different markets around the world. So we tailor how we manage it in different regions. I think the key thing to bear in mind is that it's all anonymized, right? So we're not going to an individual level, and that's where I think a lot of the personal concerns or the privacy concerns are. But that said, collecting that information, you can all of a sudden develop patterns around usage, and then you can use that information through analytics, and it's something that we've invested in recently. And we feel that by combining the two, the metadata and a strong analytics platform, you can really make much more useful recommendations to your customers, therefore adding value. In the long term, you're helping your customers merchandise their content, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Okay, so one more question before you get to the demo, which is, what are your options then for identity management? So if you're going across these different devices and it is all anonymized data,
yes,
what are the options for managing those identities?
So there's two distinct categories. One is the actual usage data and the other is the profile. So the profile, obviously you have to secure it, but all of that information's in the cloud. And that's what's helping the services create the awareness of who the individual is on different platforms. And that's basically an opt-in kind of an experience, right? The actual usage data, again, that's what's anonymized and that's being kept separate, but there's a correlation between the two.
Right. Okay, now I'll let you move on to the fun stuff. You can run your demo.
All right, so one of the things that we've been talking about here at the show is our Rovi Entertainment Unbound, and ultimately the simplest way to think of it is hyper-personalized TV everywhere. So in the environment today, we've got QAM networks that are starting to integrate IP, and products are designed with that in mind. So as you look at the interface, it's a little bit different from what you expect from a Rovi product, and specifically that it's not the grid, right? It's a different version of the grid. You talked about metadata. It's very visually rich with graphics and images, and that's what's really driving the experience these days. Consumer affinity is with the content, not necessarily with the channel or the brand, and so we go right into the content. Here's a case where we have our linear live TV listings, we have our video on demand, we have our catch-up, and we have our stash, which is basically web bookmarks. And you'll notice the icon at the top right for personalized profile. And when we think about, say, I'm John and I like Heroes. Heroes is one of my favorite shows, and I tune in at 3:38 in the afternoon. Well, the show's aired, but it's already 15 minutes in. I can certainly go back and start over. So, you know, your standard traditional use cases are all being supported. It's just a slightly different paradigm in terms of how you're getting to that functionality. So in this case, you're seeing a stream being kicked off, basically because we've got the start over system in place in the back end.
Right.
As you go forward and you look at VOD, it's really about the metadata. You know, so how do you sell more VOD? How do you upsell VOD? It's going to come down to, you got to have the metadata that describes the program. It's got to be visually rich, and it's got to help consumers find what they want. And that's then talking to recommendations and how you're driving recommendations through the experience. Catch up, it's, you know, the standard use case. You have your subscription, you want to catch up with a series, it's all in there. It's just, again, a different navigation paradigm to find it. And then when we talk to Stash, you want to surf the web to find video, and you want to integrate that video into your experience. Television is not the greatest platform to do that, right, with the remote control. So this is a system where you can go out and surf the web using the more appropriate devices, bookmark into the browser, and then the system automatically uploads.
So, because a lot of people may not be familiar with this, you're talking about doing the search and discovery and also the bookmarking of the content that you might be interested in watching on a large screen later, but starting out with that on a second screen on a tablet or a smartphone.
That's right.
Okay.
And with technologies like DivX plus streaming, where you have adaptive bitrate streaming, you know, supports 1080 HD quality, all of a sudden now you have a streaming experience on the TV that is super.
Right.
So if we move along to the cross-platform experience, and we think about how we're integrating in tablets like the iPad. I think they're going to cut over to the iPad, to the camera. There we go. It's my friend Bill over here. It's a similar paradigm to what you're seeing. So there's continuity in terms of the user interface between the two platforms. It's all web services based, so it's the same services driving both platforms. The recommendations are the same across platforms as well. And you'll also note in the top right corner, you're also managing your profiles through the device, and you can change profiles. One example here is we've got multiple family members profiled, and in this case it's mom, and you can see that the screen is actually outlined in purple, whereas on the other screen it was John's and it was outlined in black. So as you change profiles, you're signifying that the experience is actually different. So it's someone else's experience, plus all of the content changes. So, and you'll see that as we switch a profile here, all of the recommendations that are surfaced in the guide have changed. The other thing is the tablet's not just about finding content. You can also view and kick off sessions on the device. So in one use case, mom's surfing on the couch with her iPad. Something's on the big screen that she doesn't feel is appropriate for the family, but she finds something that's interesting. She can decide to send it to the big screen and take over the primary device in the home, simply by dragging the content up and snapping it then onto the big screen through a multi-screen application. And so now mom's taken back over control of the TV, decided what's appropriate for the kids, and now she can also, because it's a smart TV, it's streaming through the TV, not through the tablet, so she can go back doing the other things that she had on her schedule to do and utilize the device while it's playing now on the TV.
Great.
So
well,
hyper-personalization.
Hyper-personalization. And I would love to ask more, to talk more, but we're out of time for this session segment. So, but if you want to see more of the Rovi demonstration and talk to these guys, they're at booth 3007, so stop by. And thank you very much,
thank
Bob.
you.
I appreciate it.